When I bought my own place, I wrote 5 questions on this yellow pad with a mark by the third, the septic, the one I never asked, and it cost me 2 years. That notebook is still open this morning, and it is the cheapest thing I own. Most folks believe the seller has to tell you what is wrong with raw land, and in a few states, he owes you some of that. He does not. But in most states, he owes you no defect at all. The land sells as is, and a stranger owes you nothing until you ask him straight. Here is the honest turn. This is not about inspecting the land yourself or catching a liar. It is about asking so plainly that a lie becomes expensive for him. The moment a seller answers a straight question with a knowing lie, his silence turns into fraud. The law calls it fraudulent misrepresentation, and that puts the law on your side. That is what these 5 questions are for. This is groundwork, where the land, the history, and plain hard-won sense meet. Go back to that table and the fence that was never quite where the seller said it was. Start with a fence, because a fence lies more often than a man does. A man named Harlan trusted the seller's fence, built his barn near it, and lost that barn to the neighbor's claim in court. So ask it plain, across the table. Where exactly is the property line, and has it been confirmed by a recent survey? A man who knows will tell you. A man who doesn't get vague, and that vagueness is the first real thing you learn. That old fence can walk your boundary out from under you. Where a neighbor has openly used your strip for years, 5, sometimes 20 by state, the law can hand him the title. They call it adverse possession. A survey runs $500 to $1,500, the price of a good used tractor tire set, against a lawsuit that costs 20 times to argue. The question costs a minute. The answer you drag out of him costs him the lie. But a line on the ground is one thing, and what runs across it another. The next question is water, and water has laws of its own. Now you ask the water straight. How much does this well give, and what right do I have to that creek? Harlan learned that lesson slow. A well and a creek in plain view, and still the water was never rightly his. Across much of the West, water follows prior appropriation, first in time, first in right. In those states, the neighbor who claimed that creek 2 generations back holds the better claim, no matter that it runs across your land now. And owning the well is not owning the creek. The law counts groundwater and surface water apart, and a seller who blurs the two is the one you watch. A household well is thin under 5 gallons a minute, 1 bucket every 12 seconds, though what you need turns on your family, your garden, and any tank you store in. So ask and listen. A man who knows names the gallons and names the right by its holder, plain. A man who hides says the well is fine, the creek is right there, and moves you along. That evasion is your answer. The line on the ground was the first question, the water the second. The third is what lies under the house, and the ground can fail a home before it is built. That third question, the septic one, is the one I skipped myself. I found the perfect flat lot, and only then learned the ground would not take a septic. He never asked. That one missing question cost me the lot and 2 years of building I never got to start. So ask it. Has this lot passed a percolation test, and when? Ask a man who did the work, and the date comes back without a pause. A man who skipped it, or buried a failed answer, says the soil is fine and changes the subject. That change of subject is the answer you came for. Here is why it has teeth. Away from a sewer line, a house needs septic, and septic needs soil that drains at the right rate. The perc test measures it. A pit dug in the dirt, timed to see how fast the water soaks away. Fail quietly, and there is no septic. No septic, no permit. No permit, and your pretty flat lot is a field you cannot build on. That test typically runs $300 to $1,000, set against a lot you can never build on, the whole trade, laid plain before you sign. Line, water, ground, 3 questions down. The next question is older than the rest because part of what stands on that land has been there for decades, and the law treats an old building differently than a bare field. So stand at an old barn and ask the seller straight, what was built here before 1978, and does any of it come with the land? I have watched a buyer skip that one question and pay for the silence twice over. Once for a doctor, once to strip the old paint off every wall. So ask it plainly and watch the answer. Here is what makes that question bite. Any structure built before 1978 falls under a federal rule. The seller has to tell you the lead paint hazards he knows about, no matter what the state's own as-is law says. As-is lets a seller stay quiet about a bare field. It does not let him lie about the old paint on that barn when you ask him to his face. Get it wrong, and the cost is not small. A child in that farmhouse. A garden turned in soil that old peeling paint can foul over the years. The lead does not leave when the seller does, and neither does the bill to make it right. Nothing to hide, and he'll name every building, its year, and whether the paint was tested or stripped. Plain, no pause. A man who is hiding says the barn is solid, don't you worry, and steers you back to the view. That steering is your answer. Line, water, ground, and now the old buildings. 4 questions down. The last one you cannot see at all, because it does not stand on the land or run across it. It sits in the records, and it can follow the deed straight into your hands. The last one you cannot walk or dig. On a split estate, the mineral rights under your feet can belong to somebody else, and in many states, that owner can bring equipment onto your land to reach them. I once watched a buyer skip this question and pay a stranger for the right to drill on his own front pasture. So ask for all of it at once. Does anyone else hold the mineral rights? And are there any tax liens, easements, or exemptions on this land? A seller with clean records answers each part plain. One who is hiding says the taxes are current and lets the rest go unspoken. And here is where it gets expensive. A tax lien, or a hidden easement, travels with the deed itself, invisible on a walkthrough, but fully binding the day you sign. Drop the farming, and some states, Texas among them, bill you years of back taxes at once, with interest stacked on top. A field can hand you a bill the size of a used truck. So it all comes back to the man across the table. This last question asks whether the man across the table has been straight about all of it. A seller who names who owns the minerals, what the land owes, and who can cross it has left nothing in the dark. That is what an honest answer means. Not that the land is perfect, but that the man selling it is done hiding. Now the notebook lies closed on the table, and the whole of it comes into view at once. 5 lines, 5 questions, 1 small mark by the third, where I never asked about the septic, and it cost me 2 years. The line, the water, the ground, the old buildings, the records. Each one turns a thing the seller could leave unspoken into a thing he cannot lie about to your face and stay clean. Ask them, and you keep the barn a neighbor of mine once lost in court. 5 direct questions, asked out loud and answered on record, take about a minute each. So here is the one question I will leave you with before you drive out to look at any piece of ground. When you sit across that table, which will you trust? The minute it costs to ask, or the year it costs to stay quiet? This is groundwork, where the land, the history, and the plain, hard-won sense meet.